In the summer of 2021, I felt like I had nothing to teach and very little to write. As requests for speaking about trauma flooded into my inbox, I was experiencing a level of spiritual fatigue that I could not ignore. So I began reading a lot of Howard Thurman. I turned to his writings and his sermons. Thurman is a figure, of course, who looms large at Boston University, but he became a guide for me and for my work in chaplaincy and for my own constructive theological writing. He was speaking about trauma before the study of trauma. And interestingly, he even used the language of the nervous system, talking about the need to rewire neural pathways to cultivate sensations of goodness. I'm going to say that again. He even used the language of the nervous system, talking about the need to rewire neural pathways to cultivate sensations of goodness. Goodness is not something we feel, it's something we cultivate. And Thurman believed that in climates of ill will, the work of churches, especially in worship spaces, was to collectively cultivate goodwill, palpably generating spiritual energy that could maybe possibly cut through toxic climates. It was an experiment, and worship was, for Thurman, the experimental space. If people from various backgrounds, beliefs, races, and cultures can experience the warmth of fellowship, they will leave the experience taking something of that warmth with them. It was not a belief that they carried away from church, it was a sensation. If I had more time, I would talk about the sensation of total regard. This is what I think Thurman was cultivating, that you could experience or feel in church. Walking out of Marsh Chapel, right? This is local history. Walking out of Marsh Chapel, having experienced this sensation of fellowship, the worshiper might be able to deposit something of that warmth into everyday exchanges. And instead of looking for goodness out there, you are its herald, its embodied messenger. Thurman believed that religion is capable of putting us in touch with an experience of life, capital L. It can bring us as exhausted ones in touch with an inexhaustible resource that can sustain us whatever the climate. But religion often loses its way and becomes not about this at all. It becomes diminishing and life-limiting. Thurman believed that worship spaces and classrooms can rewire us. They can be spaces in which to give goodness a voice. We know that he sometimes put a big question out there in class when he taught, and then he sat silent for 30 minutes. Teachers and students, preachers and parishioners were not there to debate goodness or to parse what it was. They were there to center down into the truth of who we are, a truth he believed that was contained in the spirituals, in the sung theology of his people. If I were teaching a class, we would do some exegetical work here. But I just want you to note here this theology of engaging with life for him came really from the theology of the spirituals. And here I'll just read it and let it sit with you. There's something present in the spirit of humanity, sometimes even taking the form of great arrogance, sometimes quietly nourishing the springs of resistance to a great tyranny. There is something in the spirit of the human that knows that the dualism, however apparently binding, runs out, exhausts itself, and leaves a core of assurance that the ultimate destiny of the human is good. This becomes the raw material of all hope and is one of the taproots of religious faith for the human spirit. When it applies to the individuals and becomes the norm of human relationships, a new sense of the ethical significance of life becomes manifest. This is his reflection on Obama. You know, there is a balm in Gilead. Interestingly, he gave those lectures on the spirituals as the Ingersoll Lecture at Harvard Divinity School. So there's a nice connection there between Toni Morrison and Thurman. So I've found thinking with Thurman helpful, right, in my spiritual exhaustion, because he works from the other side of trauma. He studies everyday exchanges with people, how animals react under threat, how fear can immobilize us, how it can render us as non-agents subject to the control of others. I think Thurman would have a lot to say today about our current climate. What may be accounted for in this national election process is that losses, unprocessed grief, and unattended trauma can surface as resentment and bitterness. Unintegrated trauma can lead to cultures of ill will.